Talk to Gemara at the top of Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph. Rab Shimon Poiker. Rab Shimon holds that if you eat the Gid Anoshim of a Behemoth Tmeya, you're not Chayiv Malchus. None, not for the Behemoth Tmeya and not for the Gid Anoshim. Frank the Gemara of Rab Shimon Monashich. With Monashich, according to Rab Shimon, you should be Chayiv at least one Malchus. Issur Chal al Issur. If Issur is Chal al Issur, so that the Issur Gid is Chal on the Issur Behemoth Tmeya, he should get two malchus, one for behemoth tomato and one for gid. And the ain Issur Chal al Issur, and if you hold the Issur Gid will not be Chal on the Issur behemoth tomato, at least l'chayv mishum tuma dekota. At least he should be mechuyev malchus for eating the gid of the behemoth tomato als boser behemoth tomato. Zok the Gemara, v'yi ein v'gidin b'noisen tam, and if Reb Shimon holds that a gid is like a piece of wood, it's not boser, so therefore there'd be no malchus, there'd be no Issur for eating behemoth meya, but l'chayiv mishum gid, so then at least there should be a chiv as gid anosha. Gid anosha, the Torah said, is aser even if it's not boser. Amar Rava, Zok Rava, lo oidem kasav ein begidin b'noisen tam. Really holds ein begidin b'noisen tam. So then the question is, why isn't there a chiv malchus for gid? So the Gemara, the shiny house of Amar Kra, that when the Torah forbid to get a nosha, this is what the Torah said. Al kein lo yoichlu b'nei Yisrael et get a nosha. Bnei Yisrael may not eat to get a nosha of an animal. Mi shegide asur b'sar motor. Do you know where the Torah prohibits the achila of the get a nosha? Only on gidin, where the basar of the animal is mutter. It's only the get a nosha that's asur. Al kein lo yoichlu b'nei Yisrael et get a nosha. Don't eat only to get a nosh of the animal. The rest of it you could eat. Obviously, we're speaking about an animal that you could otherwise eat. And therefore, a chiddush of Reb Shimon is that there's no din get a nosh on a behemoth tmeya, and the get a nosh is not basar, and therefore, there's no chiyuv for behemoth tmeya. Amar we don't have. What about how oichel get a nosh shal nevela? No, the veil is different than the behemoth tmeya, because the Issur of the behemoth tmeya comes before the Issur of the gid, but the Issur of the veil comes after the Issur of the gid. So, if anything, you should be mechuyev for the gid adosha. Question is, will the Issur of the veil be chal on the Issur gid? Zok the Bryce, Zok the Peter, Rab Meir is mechayev shtayim, sai for the gid adosha and sai for the veil. So obviously he holds that the Issur of the veil is chal on the Issur gid. You only chayiv one for the Issur gid because the Issur of nevela will not be chal on the Issur gid. Which is not stam an Issur. There's also an Issur hanon. A shor niskal is also bano. A carbon is also bano. So there's an extra chaymer in the secondary Issur. Shechayev Shtayim, that will be chal upon the Issur gid. Zok to Gemara, we have over here, this Tana, obviously, this Chacham hold that the regular Issur Koil doesn't work, because Nevela is also Issur Koil, because Nevela isn't only chal on the gid anosha, Nevela is chal on the whole behem. Yet, even though it's chal on the whole behem, Zok to Chacham, it still will not be chal on the gid anosha. Yet, when it comes to an Issur Chamer, such as an oil and char nisko, we say that it is going to be chal on the gid anosha. So who is this Tana that makes that distinction? That by a standard Issur koil, he will say ein Issur chal Issur, but if the Issur koil has a twist in that there's extra Issurim here, such as a Issur hano, there he'll say that Issur is chal on Issur. So Zok to Gemara, who is this Tana? Let me just find the place. Uman hai Tana. Who is this Tana? The Issur koil, Issur chal Issur less. If it's a standard Issur koil, he does not say Issur chal Issur. But if it's Issur koil, Issur chamer. But if it's Issur koil with a twist, that there's also an added Issur anah here, Islay there, he will say it's Issur chal Issur. Omer Rava, you know who this Tana is? Rabbi Yosy Aglili. The Tanan Rabbi Yosy Aglili taught us in the Mishnah. Tamei she'achal kodesh. We know the halacha is if someone who's tamei eats kachim, he's chayiv koris b'mezid and a chatos b'shoyim. Now, what if you have tamei kachim meat and a Torah person eats that kachim meat, which happens to be tamei? Then there's only a lav. So what happens here? Tamei she'achal kodesh, bein kodesh tamei, bein kodesh Torah is chayiv. That is the sheet of the Tanakh. Yosy no. Tamei shachal satar chayiv. Where does the Torah say that you're chayiv kares if you're tamei and you eat kachim? That if you eat kachim, that would otherwise be just fine. It would be tar. But tamei shachal satamei. But if the tamei person only ate kachim, that's already disqualified because the kachim is already tamei potter. There he would not be chayiv chatas. Why? What he ate was anyway ruined. It was already tamei. That's not where the Torah is mechayiv you kares and chatos if you ate it. It's only if you ate tahar dika kachim. Amr loy, they told him, I don't understand. Why should it make a difference? Av tamei she'achal satar. If a tamei person eats tar kachim, before he puts it into his mouth, it becomes tamei because he touched it. Even shenoga by tamu. So therefore, anyway, the Issur, you're always eating kachim that's tamei. So why Rabbi Yosy, do you make a distinction that if the person was tar and the kachim was tar, that's where you're chayiv, that kachim is going to be tamei before he eats it anyway. So how could you make that distinction? Elamai, it must have to do with Issur Chal al Issur. And Rava explains, Yomer Rava, what if first the person became tamei? Now that he became tamei, all basar kachim are also to him with a chiyuv kares. Then, after he became tamei, this particular piece of meat became tamei. So his chiyuv, his Issur was chal before the Issur on the meat because he became tamei first. So therefore, there everybody agrees that you would be chayiv. Even Rabbi Yosy clearly agrees that you would be chayiv. The Issur kares come. His Issur to eat any kachim because he was tamei came first. Keep ligi. You know where Rabbi Yosy clearly says that you wouldn't be mechuyev kares or chatos is benitma basar the agach nitma. What if he was tar and one piece of kachim became tamei? Then he became tamei, and then he went and ate that piece of kachim. The Issur was chal first upon this meat itself. Rabbanan islu Issur koidel. Rabbanan hold, even though this meat was also, he's still going to be also to eat it when he becomes tamei. The migud mechai b'chatichas tahor is the alma. When he became tamei, he's prohibited from all kachim meat, not just this piece. Therefore, he will also be mechuyev kares and chatos if he eats this piece of meat that was tamei before he became tamei. But for Rabbi Yosy Aglili, Leslie Issur kodesh. Rabbi Yosy does not hold the Issur kodesh. The migol amrin. Therefore, once the basar became tamei, and there's an Issur for him to eat that basar, when he becomes tamei, no additional Issur gets added. So to Gemara, but we still have a problem because the Issur kares is much more severe than the Issur lav. So just because he became tamei later, his Issur is coming with the chiyuv kares. So why shouldn't that still be on the Issur of eating kachim that's tamei, which is only a lav? Rabbi Yosy Glilin he the Issur koila lesle be Issur kal, but yava Issur chamur yochal al Issur kal. Why don't you give credit to the fact that the Issur to eat kachim when you yourself are tamei comes in Issur kares, so that should truly be chal merely on the Issur lav, that is chal on the meat that became tamei. And how do you see that? Tumas aguf is bekares. Amar Ravashi, yes, sure. Tumas aguf is bekares. That's a chumrah, but don't think that when the meat tamei, it's a kula, because the meat has another feature that's more chomer than a person being tamei. You know why? Because manali malad the tumas aguf chamura, dilma tumas posa chamura. You know why? Because it's irrevocable. It's you can't repair that. the less tar b'mikvah. So maybe you look at it from a different perspective. If he becomes tummy, he can fix that. He'll go to the mikvah and he's back in good standing. But the meat, once it becomes tummy, can never get better. So maybe that's a chumrah. So therefore, you cannot say one is more chumrah than the other. And therefore, if the Issur was chal on the meat first took Rabbi Yosy Glili, the additional Issur for him as a tummy person to eat the meat is not chal at all. So now we found a Rabbi Yosy Glili who doesn't hold Issur koil works, but he doesn't. We haven't seen what he said beferish about Issur Chomer, so we're going to assume that he would be moida that by the Issur Chomer it will work because that would stem perfectly with agreeing that if there was a gira nosha and then it became an oilo or a shar nisko, the extra Issur would chal because that carries with it in addition to the Issur achila, it carries an Issur hana. Okay, let's turn on the base. Rabbi Yosy Glili Leslie Issur koil. So you basically have told me that Rabbi Yosy Glili does not hold the Issur koil. But I'll prove to you from a brisa that in fact he does hold the Issur. But Tanya we learned Shabbos v'Yom Kippur. What if Yom Kippur falls on the Shabbos? So now you have two Isurim to do malacha. Now the Issur Shabbos comes with an Issur skila, and the Issur Yom Kippur comes with an Issur karos. But either way, if you did it b'shogeg, there would be a chiyuv carbon katos. So what happens if on a Yom Kippur shechalius b'Shabbos shogag b'atzamu minayin shechayiv al zeh ba'atmei v'al zeh ba'atmei? How do you know you're chayiv a chatos al Yom Kippur and you're chayiv a chatos al Shabbos? Talmudomer Shabbos he Yom Kippurim who divrei Rabbi Yosy. Now Rashi explains. You might think to yourself, why does Bechalal this have anything to do with Issur Chalal Issur? Here, the Issur of Shabbos and the Issur of Yom Kippur came exactly at the same time at Shkia. So it's not Chalal Issur; they chal together. Zok Rashi at this point in the Gemara holds that doesn't count. You'll still have the problem of an Issur Chalal Issur, even if they were both chal at the same time. We're going to see svaras to argue soon. Maybe they're not chal at the same time. But right now, we're going to discount that issue for the time being. Now we're going to just look directly at the Issur Chalal Issur. Clearly, Rabbi Yosy Glili says that there's a chiyuv for Shabbos and a chiyuv for Yom Kippur. So it must be because of Issur Chalal Issur. The question is, which one is chal on which? Zok Rashi, each one, Shabbos and Yom Kippur, have a special reason why they should be chal on the other. Shabbos should chal on Yom Kippur is very simple. Yom Kippur only comes with an Issur karos. Shabbos comes with an Issur skila. So that's why Shabbos will be chal on Yom Kippur. On the other hand, Yom Kippur will be chal on Shabbos because Shabbos only comes with an Issur malacha, while Yom Kippur comes with an Issur achila. So since they both have advantages, we'll say that they'll both be chal. That's the svara of Rabbi Yosy Glili. But Rabbi Kiva Omer, Einoi chayiv ela achas. You're only chayiv once. Now, I'm not sure yet if it's Shabbos or if it's Yom Kippur, but he says, Einoi chayiv ela achas. Sholach Rabin, Mishum, Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina. So this is a problem for us because we've just illustrated that Rabbi Yosy Glili holds. Now by Issur's koil, by a standard Issur koil, Issur is Chalal Issur. And we explained that the Tana, the Chachamim who said that the Issur Nevela will not be Chal on the Issur Gid, we said that's actually going to be going according to Rabbi Yosy Glili. Well, you don't say Issur. So here's our problem. Zok Gemara can easily verify this problem. Rabin Mishum Rabbi Yosy, Sholach Rabin Mishum Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina. You're right. Kachat social Mishnah. I'm not going to say you made a mistake. You have the girsa of the Mishnah as accurate. That's how it's printed. But I happen to know, that you got to flip it around. I happen to know that it's actually Rabbi Yosy Glili who says Einei chayiv ela achas, and it's the Rabbanon. It's Rabbi Kiva who says that you're chayiv too. So therefore, we don't have a problem anymore with Rabbi Yosy Glili because you just flip around the shitas. Shalach Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yaakov bar Giyurei mishum de Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yaakov bar Giyurei sent in the name of Rabbi Yochanan a tidbit of information, a little bit of a clarification in the Shita of Rabbi Yosy Aglili, who says you don't say Issur. And he says as follows: Rabbi Yosy Aglili, based on this version of Rabbi Yosy Aglili. After we flip the Shitas, where Rabbi Yosy Aglili holds, you're only mechuyev in one Issur, not two, because by Shabbos and Yom Kippur you say ein Issur, Chalal Issur. What would happen if Yom Kippur fell out on Shabbos, but you did a malacha and you forgot that it was Shabbos, but you knew it was Yom Kippur? So Shogeg b'Shabbos, which would trigger a Chiyuv Chatos, the Hazed b'Yom Kippurim, which would not trigger a Chiyuv Chatos, because Mazid doesn't bring a Karban Chatos. So there for sure Chayiv, there you're for sure Chayiv, the Issur Shabbos is Chal on this Yom Kippur, and you did it b'Shogeg, you're mechuyev to bring a. But what would be if Hazed b'Shabbos? You did a malacha b'mezid, you knew it was Shabbos, and you did a malacha b'mezid, so there's no chiyuv chatas anymore because it was b'mezid. But for shagag b'yoyim kippur, when you forgot that it was Yom Kippur, that would be potter. Why? Because we'll say that the Issur of Shabbos is chal on the Issur of Kippur, but the Issur of Yom Kippur will not be chal on the Issur of Shabbos. So therefore, if there is no chiyuv chatas because of the Issur of Shabbos, the Issur of Yom Kippur will not trigger a chiyuv chatas. My time, how would you explain this member that I just explained? But we want to hear it from Abaye himself. Abaye, very simple, because Shabbos, the Issur Shabbos comes before the Issur of Kippur. So this is what I was referring to earlier. Here we have a spin where you could say the Issur Shabbos comes before. They both come at Shkia, but look at the difference. Shabbos Kaviyah B'Kaim, every single Shabbos is already set in concrete in the calendar. Day 7. But Yom Kippurim, until the Bezdin's Mekadesh T'Chodesh, that day has not yet been designated as Yom Kippurim. It's Beidina Hu D'Kamalei. So Zokta Baye, I think in Svar, that means that the Issur Shabbos preceded the Issur of Kippur, and therefore the Issur of Kippur will not be Chal, and that would explain Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of Rabbi Yosy Aglili that Hezid B'Shabbos V'Shogeg B'Yom Kippur, you're potter from anything. Zog to Gemara, Amalei Rava. Rava told Abaye, I completely disagree with what you're saying. Because the fact is, Shkia is when both Issur are Chal. Soif, Harvayu, Bahani, and other calls. So that doesn't explain why you should only be Mechuyev Achatas for Shabbos and not Yom Kippur. Since they both happen at exactly the same time, you should be Mechuyev Achatas for each one. And therefore, if it was Hazed on Shabbos and Shogeg B'Yom Kippur, you should still be able to bring the Chatas for Yom Kippur. Ela Amarava, let me tell you what happened. You completely got the whole story wrong. Yes, in fact, there was a case where someone was hazed b'Shabbos and he was shogeg b'Yom Kippurim, and they were not machayev machatos, but for a completely different reason than what you're talking about. And what happened is that year there was a Shas Hashemah, and just like by the times of Chashmonoyim, they were geyser that were not allowed to declare a shchodesh. If you can't declare a shchodesh, so then basically you just eliminated all the Yom Tovim, which was precisely the plan of the God, to eliminate Yom Tovim by merely outlawing Kiddush Shchodesh, which means there was no Yom Kippur. Now Chazal were worried if we're not going to have Yom Kippur for years, Yidden will forget about Yom Kippur. So they decided that we're going to make a fake Yom Kippur, and we're going to announce Shabbos Parshas Hazinu is going to be Yom Kippur. It wasn't really Yom Kippur because there was no Kiddush Shchodesh, but they just designated Shabbos. They weren't worried about getting caught because every Shabbos is anyway a holiday, and the Goyim didn't prohibit us from keeping Shabbos. But at least we'll make believe it's Yom Kippur so that we won't forget about Yom Kippur. That's what happened. So Shema the Haifa was a Sasha Shema. The Sholchim Mitam the Yom Kippur the Ashata or Shabtahu. They announced that Stroll, we're going to keep Shabbos Hazinu. It wasn't Hazinu. I'm just making it up. At the end of the year, they made up Shabbos Hazinu is going to be Yom Kippur, but it wasn't really Yom Kippur. And on that day, someone was over Shabbos b'mezid and Yom Kippur b'shoyig. You know why he doesn't bring a carbon? Because it wasn't really Yom Kippur. It was a fake Yom Kippur. When Rava came and other people came from Eretz Yisrael, they told us, in fact, that was the story. It was Rachmana L'Kla, they had a terrible shmat. They were not allowed to declare a shchodesh, and because of that, they made an artificial Yom Kippur, and that's what the person violated. And of course, for that, you don't bring a korban. Getting back to the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said that the Issur Gid Anosha applies even to a behemoth tamei. And to prove it is, it was already also from the Bnei Yaakov, where there wasn't even such a thing yet as a behemoth tamei. Now, the Gemara yesterday explained this with a twist. It's not stam that it happened before. The point that Rabbi Yehuda was making, that Vibal, there was already the Issur of Gid Anosha preceding the Issur behemoth tamei. That means the Gid Anosha is an Issur Chomer, and therefore it will be Chal even upon a behemoth tamei. So the Brisa elaborates on the conversation and tells us what the Chachamim responded to Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya Omalei Rabbi Yehuda, V'chi Nemer, does it say in the Pasuk, Al Kein Lo Yochlu B'nei Yaakov Is Gid Anosha, which would indicate Klal Yisrael before Kabbalah Satayra, V'aloi Lo Nemer Ela B'nei Yisrael, V'loi Nikru B'nei Yisrael, Ad Sinai. The Pasuk says, therefore the B'nei Yisrael won't need to get Anosha. B'nai Yisrael we got that designation by Sinai, and therefore, just because it says Al Kein Lo Yochlu B'nai Yisrael, but a Ma'aseh of Yaakov, but the Torah is telling us that the Issur will only come in by Kabbalah Satayra. El Shenichtav El B'Sinai Nema. That's where the halacha was given. El Shenichtav B'Koimai Lo Yidamei Zatam Neser Lai. When the Torah asked it by Sinai, but once the Torah put in the narration, the Torah put it in over there, because then it makes sense as to why it was Nesar to them. And it's more than that. David's mentioned this morning. It doesn't say Al Kein Yaakov Lo Yisaychel Es Gid Anosha. Shem didn't talk Yaakov. It's like the narrator talking. Al Kein Lo Yochlu. Therefore, Bnei Yisrael don't need to get Anosha. Who told Yaakov? Who told anybody? It was never given until Sinai. That's the shita of the Chacham. Zog to Gemara, Masav Rabbah. Are you telling me that we were never referred to as Bnei Yisrael until after Sinai? All over Mitzrayim, we're called Bnei Yisrael. It says even earlier than the Shibud of the Yisur Bnei Yisrael is Yaakov Aviyah. When Yaakov died, they carried Bnei Yisrael. So we already had our designation of Bnei Yisrael earlier on. Now you're saying that we only got it later? So tomorrow, no, Acher Ma'isa. The Torah, after the Torah was given, we were considered Bnei Yisrael. So the Torah refers to them then as Bnei Yisrael because that's what they are now. But that doesn't mean that they had the designation already of Bnei Yisrael at that point. They only got that designation after Kabbalah. At least from the point where it says V'yisur Bnei Yisrael, it should be Aser. Zakta Gemara. Oh, you know what? I might have touched La'acher Ma'isa incorrectly. Maybe La'acher Ma'isa means that was after the story. Let's just look at Rashi here. I apologize for that mistake. La'acher Ma'isa Rashi is La'acher Oisa Ma'isa Shenevak Imoi Lizman Ruba V'voim Padnara. That was after the fight that he had with the Malach, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at that point when he fought with the Malach, called Yaakov Yisrael, Yalikra Shimcha Yaakov Kim Yisrael. So it was later on that he was referred to Israel, which was after that month. So I did say it correctly. So Zok to Gemara, Amar Le Rabacha, Baredi Rabal Ravashi, Shudemahi Shaitalitz. So why wouldn't it have become Osir from when Klal Yisrael was referred to in the Torah as Bnei Yisrael? They were directly referred to as Bnei Yisrael when they were carrying Yaakov. So at that point, the Gid Anosha should already be Osir to them. So Gemara, that's Nishtehi Nishteher. Shaita Lav Shasmai Savoy. It wasn't exactly when it happened, and V'lo Shasmat Torah. So you're going to start dripping halachas tidbits at a time. Either the only two logical places to outlaw the Gid Anosha, either right when it happened with Yaakov Avinu's Ma'aseh, or by Matan Torah, in the middle of some random time to enable the Issur of Gid Anosha. That's not mistake. So therefore, Zogin Rabbanon, it came by Matan Torah. Ton Rabbanon, Ever Minachai. The Issur of Ever Minachai, Noig beBehema Chai Voif Beit Vein Beit Tahir. There's an Issur to eat Ever Minachai, even from Behemoth's Tameis. Divi Rabbi Yehuda for Rabbi Eliezer. And that makes sense as well because there's a discussion that Yosef claimed that his brothers were eating Avram and Achai, and in those days it was even on a Behemoth Tameah because we didn't have any mitzvahs yet, and Behemoth Tameahs were not yet outlawed to us. But the Issur Avram and Achai only applies by a Behemoth. They actually both dash from the same pasuk, but they come to a different conclusion in talking about the same pasuk. What does the pasuk say? It says, "Rak chazak levilti echar lesadam ki hadam hu nefesh." Let's look at the pasuk inside. It says, "Rak chazak levilti echar lesadam ki hadam hu nefesh," and then the final clause of this pasuk, which Rashi says is the punchline, "V'lo yisoichal hanefesh im habasar." Don't eat the nefesh with the basar. Only eat the basar once there's no nefesh left. So the Issur, the place where the Torah tells us it's Issur to eat Avram and Achai, is compared to eating dam. So let's turn on to Daf Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. The balt that's in the same parsha, the same pasuk that talks about dam, will say, any animal whose dam you're not allowed to eat, if you're not allowed to eat Avram and Achai, Vandi Tmein, Behemoth Tmeis, horses, or any other animal that's not kosher, Nami. Hoil Vatam Tzuval Domin, there's an Issur to eat the blood even of a Behemoth Tmeia. So therefore, Atam Tzuval Levorin, so too the Issur Avram and Achai that's in the same pasuk as Dam applies to every Behemoth whose Dam is Asur, which means every Behemoth. But for Rabbanan Zavri, it says, Loisaichel HaNefesh im HaBosar. Don't eat the nefesh with the basar, but only eat the basar. Well, basar l'chudei. It must be that the basar was mutter. Kol b'sari mutter at the mitzvah leivarav. V'chol she'im b'sari mutter at the mitzvah leivarav. Okay, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem, we were zoichet to finish Daf Kuf Aleph. And tomorrow we'll learn Kuf Beis. I'm hoping to be back in town tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll be the shul. It all depends.